Hey everyone, thanks for joining me today on our February 2021 product deep dive from Sounds Profitable. Today we are joined with Erik Barraud, SVP of Product at Adswizz, and we're going to go through dynamic ad insertion for buy side, so agencies and advertisers, using Adswizz's AudioMatic tool. So Erik, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hey guys, well, the short or long story. I'll stick it to the short one. So I think, I'm Erik and heading up all things product at Advertiser. Advertiser is a technology provider for all things audio for both the supply side and demand side. And by myself, I've been an audio nerd since day one. I've been in this industry more than 10 years. I actually started in this 15 years ago when I started my own internet station. That's how I got the virus. And since then, it's just been, evolving into what we are today, and I'm more than excited to see that 15 years later, the medium keeps mutating, evolving, new trends coming, new consumer tools comes in, new advertiser tool comes in. So it's very exciting, and I think what we're going to go over today is a demonstration that there's appetite on both sides, on the supply side and demand side. So pretty exciting.
Absolutely. And Erik, you're over in Romania. I'm in Austin, Texas. So there might be a little bit of delay. We might talk over each other a little bit, but that's the fun and power of technology right there for you. I want to say that Erik is one of the few people in this space that I've been able to go toe to toe with on a technology level. And I think he's definitely beat me a little bit on talking through some of it. So I think everybody here is in store for a really cool technical walkthrough of their AudioMatic tool. So one of the things that me and Erik have talked about as we've gone through this beforehand is the power of dynamic ad insertion. I don't think anybody is surprised that I'm, tolling the bells for how cool dynamic ad insertion is once again, because it allows a little bit more freedom. Personally, on my end, when you think about it on the publisher side, you have to think about the fact that you're not restricted in any capacity to get things up and going. You don't have to worry about making sure you sold the inventory before you get the episode out. So you're able to have a little bit more freedom. But that freedom gets even further when you look into the agency and buyer side, because while there is value for direct relationships for host read, there's so much more information available when you go on the dynamic ad insertion side that allows people to, really take advantage of individual inventory or the wider breadth of what's available. And it allows them to keep it in line with some of their bigger buys in other mediums. So the AudioMatic tool is very impressive. We're going to kick it over to Erik here, and we're going to walk through a little bit of forecasting, which is my favorite thing and one of the hardest things in advertising. Then we're going to get through campaign setup. And finally, we're going to look through a little bit of reporting on what the end result looks like. So Erik, I see here that we have the AudioMatic interface, and this is the inventory or forecast reporting, right?
Exactly. So that's going to be the first step that any user of our buy-side platform would do. Ahead of launching a campaign, obviously, you need to anticipate what's available there so that you can manage your advertisers' expectation. Does it fit into their media plan? And in my budget's going to be okay. So you're going to do what we call media planning. And media planning, as you said, is clearly forecasting what's out there, trying to understand what's the size of the ocean I can try to grasp. So what we have on the screen is actually the media planning tool of AudioMatic. And in this case, what we want to do is we want to run an audio campaign on podcast content across several parameters. And to your point earlier, this is what's great about dynamic ad insertion, right? It's really the capacity to not be tied to a piece of content you can't optimize. It's really for each single download or each single play, be able to optimize the ad delivery so that whatever your audience is on one side of the country or the other, whatever the context of the user is changing, you can adapt your campaign so that from a publisher side, you maximize your inventory because it's always dynamically available to the need of the advertiser. And for advertisers, they're coming with this background, right? If you look at advertising in general, it's not that they're only starting with audio. They might be doing video, display, other sorts of audio. In all of those forms, dynamic ad insertion is the way to go because that's the way you optimize. That's the way you have performance.
And that's a really good point to make there as you talk about the other mediums there. AudioMatic is heavily podcast in these tools here, but it's also audio. So we're going to focus on podcasting here, but if you're looking at buying audio and have a complete digital audio plan, using AudioMatic is going to let you do that all in one place, which is really cool. So that means that now podcasting doesn't have to be an island for how you buy inventory. It can, at a minimum, match in complexity and setup to what you're going to be able to do for streaming audio, which usually helps buyers and advertisers who are getting into the space expand their buys in podcasting when they can merge it in with another channel that they're already finding success with.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. We don't want podcast to be on its island, right? You don't want to have all things audio, which is super dynamic, optimization, attribution, and all the things that advertisers are used to, and on the side podcast. I think that would be a missed opportunity. You really want to look at things, all things audio, and within the bucket of audio, have similar capabilities, but then flavors of it, depending on your objective, on your brand affinity, and so on. But podcast should definitely be part of it, and that's what we're striving to do, and that's what this tool is doing. Today, we'll look at the podcast side of it more, but obviously, you want to focus on being able to include all things audio.
And I like that. The flavor mindset is really important for people to keep in mind, right? It's not that one has more or less than the other. It's that they're different sides or different flavors of the same thing, right? Like there's so many different benefits of each one of them. We don't have to look at one as better than the other. We have to meet them at what they offer and understand that there are tools like what Adswizz offers here that allow you to do multiple in one place or narrowly focus on one of them if that's your goal.
It's a complement, right? You start your day with audio, and your audio is the only thing you can do that with, right? Video and display, you're very active, you're engaged in the content. Audio is the only thing I can wake up, listen to a podcast, jump onto the news, go by my commute, listen to some music, have my work day with different pieces of audio, go back in my commute with a different podcast, go to bed with a recap of the day or a news. I have done that across several devices, across several mediums and platforms. And I think that's the great things of audio, and podcast is an addition to that. So actually, advertisers are looking at audio is that I might run campaigns on the streaming side, I'm complementing it with the podcast or vice versa. So it is very, very, very intralinked.
Yeah, I super agree. So let's dig into this UI. So we're looking at the top of it here. We have the standard setting the dates. Let's talk about the ad positioning and duration here, because this is interesting. It looks like I can determine the length of the ad that I want to set and determine pre-roll, mid-roll, and post-roll. Is that accurate?
Exactly, because obviously not all the inventory is scored equally, right? All the publishers are going to have their own monetization rules. I can have a publisher which decides I'm going to have one pre-roll, two mid-rolls, one post-roll. I could have a publisher or creator that says I only want one pre-roll. My content has no mid-roll. So all of those flavors obviously reflect the inventory that is available to you. Because if you assume that everybody's equal, then it's easy to forecast. Consumption is different, and the structure of the inventory is different. So here, what you're having actually is a flavor of looking at the kind of inventory you're after. So we could be looking at pre, mid, or all positions. Here I've selected to look at all positions. But then it's also the duration of your spots. Some publishers might decide I'm okay to have one mid-roll, but it's only going to be 30 seconds. Or I'm having one mid-roll, and that could be filled up with free ads of any duration or free ads of maximum 30 seconds each. So there are also duration and number of ads that can be inserted that define how much is available out there. So you as a buyer, you need to specify this, because if your ad is 30 seconds, it might fit in more slots than if your ad is 60 or 90 seconds. Also, depending on your objective, you might have choices to make, but that's a super important KPI when you try to see what's available as inventory.
I completely agree. And I think this is where a lot of platforms get stumped on forecasting, because as a publisher, I'll say, I have 4 mid-roll slots of 30 seconds each. And then if someone says, I want to run a 120-second ad, the two don't connect in most other systems. But in this one, what Erik's saying here is that if I put that I was looking for a 120-second ad placement, and there are 4 mid-rolls of 30 seconds each back-to-back connected, that I am eligible to run my ad in that spot. Obviously paying a little bit more on that end there because I'm taking up more inventory, but that's something cool to keep in mind, that the flexibility of the publisher side and the flexibility of the advertiser side merges together to provide that total great forecasting view.
Yeah. So then we can add some parameters, as you said. We're not going to go all the list; it's pretty extensive, but we'll focus on the key points. Obviously, what is important when you're on the buy side is that you don't necessarily own the inventory, right? So you're in what we call in a bidding system. So you're going on a marketplace, and your objective is to bid for inventory. You're going to be competing with other buyers. So when you do a forecast, you also have an idea about at which price you're willing to buy a set of impressions. CPM being the standard, cost per 1,000. Here I define I'm ready to pay $25 per cost of 1,000 impressions. That's very important as well, because the system looks at the past trends and on average, what kind of inventory get bought at what price. So you try to understand, if you're trying to buy super premium inventory in New York around Christmas for $5, there's a likelihood you're not going to get many impressions. So you're going to need to raise your price. So that's also an indicator you need to keep in mind.
And that's great for the sales planners. Like, The amount of times that I've seen somebody try and squeak in a campaign and not be able to get it, like they're like, oh, we sold it and we guaranteed it. Why isn't it delivering? And it's just like, there wasn't enough inventory at that price, at the priority. There were other campaigns that had to go. Forecasting is a ground up tool that I think is often focused so much on the sales side of like, oh, do I have enough to sell this, right? But even more so on the planning side. So this is a great tool for everybody to look at, not only the advertisers and agencies, but the people representing their inventory. So I'm very impressed with that. Lots of bells and whistles, as you said there. I think we would probably spend easily an hour going over them. But if you want to just run through them like real quick or on the targeting, we can do that.
Yeah, so here are additional delivery rules you could have. Frequency capping is if you want to control your ad load per user so that you don't bombard the same user with the same ads, you can add some rules. If you have specific advertising categories that you are representing, that's very important in the context of competitive separation. So if you have a slot of, let's say, a mid-roll with 3 positions, there is competitive separation that kicks in so that you only have one automotive category per mid-roll. So if you represent automotive, your forecast might be impacted because there's maybe a high sell-through on automotive. So those are the criteria you can input. But I think we want to focus more here on the targeting.
Absolutely.
That's your audience, right? That's who you trying to reach for. So what I went and created here is it's a media plan, which represents on average what buyers may do. What I want to point out here is that this is a simple version. Advertisers can go very, very in the details. And this is, again, a benefit of dynamic ad insertion. What you're starting to notice here is that every group is separated by an and. So I'm combining conditions, and I'll get back to it in a second. And I can also do an or. So I can create groups in between with rules and an ors, and it starts to really create complex strategy, which is not something new to audio. It's coming from what people are used to on the buy side. And here again, dynamic ad insertion allows you to offer such capabilities for advertisers looking for it.
And this is one of the things that I keep trying to stress to people, everybody in this space. You have to carve out time once a quarter, once a month, ideally, to be able to sit down with these tools and learn all these advanced features. What Erik's showing you here is very straightforward, but for some people in this space, this is already over their head because they're not giving that breathing room, right? They're being asked to buy a very specific thing, a very ones and zeros, black and white setup where they go in and they do that. But if you get to learn these tools, which are very intuitive, you're going to be able to come up with unique things that make your offering different than others, make your brand success better than others when you make these tweaks and you understand the differences. And the options here, just to call it out again. So if you're looking here, if you see we're in one section, it says and between all of them. So that means that every one of those sections needs to hit exactly for this ad to serve. Then or would be we create another set of conditions. So we could create one profile of and this is what we're looking for people in New York. And this one profile of this is people in Miami, Florida. And if those two groups are separated by the or, the end result really is that you have two options to accomplish your goal. So it's a great way to test out strategies, see what works, and really take advantage of it. And I'm going to call this out early because this is absolutely my favorite feature. In a world full of brochureware websites and not posting pricing, you can see right on there, if you see age under the second category, it lists the price of what you're selecting. So Adswizz works really hard to pull in all this other data sources, and we're going to get into that in a second. But not only are they pulling that in, but it doesn't have a question mark. It doesn't say marketplace. It doesn't say ask your server for more information. It simply shows you the price so you understand when you're forecasting what your costs are going to be. And then when you're running the campaign, you know exactly what you're expecting to spend when you set it up. So bravo to you guys on the transparency there.
It's easy to use, right? You want to make sure that it's easy to approach and start execute your campaigns.
Yeah.
So in this context, to illustrate, what we're going to do on this media plan, what we're trying to reach is actually users which are in 4 different locations. So here we went for DMA, which is the most common geographical area that advertiser will look for. And I selected 4 large metros. I could keep searching and adding DMAs or counties or additional zip code. It really depends on the level of granularity. Obviously, the lower the granularity, the more challenging you have in terms of inventory, but it might actually be good for your objective. So again, it depends on what you put the threshold. We'll keep it simple for the purpose of this demo. So once I've defined the location, what I'm actually after for my campaign is also the kind of consumers or listeners. in this context, I want to select a demographic. So I've selected the age of 18 up to 44. And the reason you're seeing here this middle gap is that sometimes we have advertisers who advertise for alcohol beverages. So being able to respect the 21 rule is key. So you can also have that if that's applicable to your campaign. But here I have a group of ages I want to be able to target, as well as a male population for the purpose of this example. We define where they are. We define who they are. Now it's interesting to define on what platform they're listening. So what this tools enables you to do is to very simplistically look at 4 main buckets, which are often the one which are easier to identify for anyone. Is either you're in a mobile situation, so you're going to be on the tablet or on mobile. You're in a more stationary situation, desktop and laptops. Digital appliances, it's our category to cover all things enabled IP, audio-enabled devices such as an Apple TV or a Roku. So there is a set of devices there which doesn't really fall in a bucket of their own, but they all together represent an interesting inventory. And obviously the well-known non-smart speakers, which I think we no longer need to present.
Yeah.
And what is important here to note is that not only I'm trying to do a strategy here, and we'll see it in the campaign setup, what is important in terms of targeting across platform is also how you want to address your message. Because I could assume here that I'm in a more personal listening experience. It's me and my phone. I have my AirPods on. I'm consuming my content right away, and it's potentially the morning. If I'm trying to target smart speaker, and let's say, for example, I'm going for a weekend campaign, well, the ad experience might be a more social one, right? My smart speaker is in the kitchen playing for a group of people. I'm having friends over for dinner, and the way I want to deliver my message might be different. So that's why it's so important. It's not only about the targeting and simply delivering the ad, is what kind of message you're going to deliver. And again, going back to this broken record, dynamic ad insertion is also what helps you do so, because you can really set apart things. And the same campaign at the same time could optimize the message you're having for people in this more personal one-to-one listening versus the people who have a more social listening experience for smart speaker. And you can address both with a different message or a different angle depending on your product.
And that's great. I'm also very happy that you used a video game controller for a digital appliance instead of everybody joking that it's a refrigerator with a screen on it.
Yeah,
it's just,
I've seen more consoles with listening to music than fridges.
We're seeing a lot of it. Xbox and PlayStation now can handle Spotify and other sources, so it's definitely really good to call out. And then let's go through the day part, because this is really neat too. This is showing me it's a real flexible tool here, but it looks like I have the option to select the listener time or my time, right?
So basically here is the time scale on which you want to run. So you've selected your flight dates. We did this above, right? We have our flight dates. We're running for 2 weeks. And here within those 2 weeks, I want to fine tune when my ad is going to run or when my campaign is going to deliver. So it's related to time and days, to your point. And here I can select 3 buckets, right? Either I'm more focused on my brand's message, so it's the agency time, me as a user here being the agency. I could focus more on the listener time. So don't care about my time zone, don't care about the advertiser time zone, it's the listener time zone that I want to make sure that I optimize. Or it might be the publisher time zone if you, for example, targeting very localized content that's originating from a radio station in a particular area because you want to tie your ads to their schedule, for example. So you can select any of those. Most commonly, you would go for listener time zone because you want to fit to the context of the listener. And then you can very easily just drag and drop and select the days and hours that are suited for your media plan. You can go and select all mornings for the whole week, or you can say that you only want late mornings and you may only want weekdays. So it's just really up to you. The system kind of it's almost like a radio scheduling, right? Hour by hour, day by day, morning drive versus afternoon drive. You can really slice it nice. And again, it's also important in the way you're advertising your company. If you're looking for commuters or you are more of a weekday compatible brand, you don't necessarily care about the weekends. So why try to buy inventory on weekends? And you don't want to have to run different campaigns instead do different setups. You want one campaign that takes that into account. So here you can do so. So it's really also depending on your context as an advertiser.
And the neat things that you can do there, right? If you do it on local time, almost every smartphone at this point, if you disconnect from Wi-Fi, it's 2 taps to get it to disconnect completely. 1 tap says, hey, at midnight, we're going to reconnect for whatever the Wi-Fi is. And so most podcasts that come out early in the morning in your local time, your phone's automatically downloading because it's charging and are on Wi-Fi. So say you want to target those people, you can do that here with the listener time. You can do it with the publication time. Say you don't want those people and you only want streaming. You could find people, and this is streaming podcast. Theoretically, you could find people on desktop, laptop, digital appliances, smart speakers, one grouping, and then the other for mobile and tablet. You could just set it so that local time, it's after they're awake. It's after they're already starting their commute and they're in their day. And there's a lot of functionality you can play around with. Can we scroll up just one quick second here?
Of course.
Okay, so I just want to call out, we have geolocation that's derived from IP address. We have demographic that's also derived from IP. And then we have the device information that's derived from user agent. So let's get into the demographic. Like that's from an IP address. We know that right now cellular and household, cellular and business IPs aren't perfect. There's not a lot we can do with demographics. So we want to make clear that this is a household IP and what we can do from there. You guys are working your hardest to make sure that you're not putting any false positives in there. But where do you get your data for demographic targeting?
So the approach we're taking, again, we could have gone through options, right? Go and shop for data partners and just throw it into the platform and let you figure it out. Fancy logos. But it's hard for you as a user, starting to get to audio. And also audio is different by itself, that the data offerings out there today, learning to get to audio, right? They're getting there. But they were actually grown and fed up through video and display, which is a very highly trackable context until this year. So the way the data offerings and products have been built were not necessarily all in line with audio. So the approach we took is really to build kind of a mashup and aggregation so that for the user, it's easy to set up and understand. For the delivery, it's efficient because we're maximizing the reach and we're trying to be transparent about the data sources. So in the case of demographic, what we've done is combining several sources and try to build kind of a waterfall model where if we are able to understand that we have an identifier, right, which comes from the app, so being a cookie or a maid, and we can leverage that one with one of our data partner, and I'll express the list soon, we're going to do that. If we don't have a maid or a cookie, so we cannot actually necessarily track, we actually have built a platform called AudioGraph, which is our probabilistic platform to try to understand have the signals I'm getting, so to your point, the IP or the user agent or combination been seen across the ecosystem or across our partners, so that I could actually reassign probabilistically, I believe that there's a high chance that this is the same user, and then we can reassign a mate. Would that not be the case, we then have a probabilistic model which tries to look more about the content and how the content has been consumed in the past, and if we can derive a probabilistic assignment of age and gender. And we do this in waterfall. And the data partners obviously are the one we're going to favor, right? They've done a lot of investments. They're trying to do their best job. So what we do is that we don't go and select one partner. We work with Exalate, we work with Nielsen, we work with Lotami, we work with LiveRamp. So all the leading platforms out there are connected to our solution. And the default offering is that we try to standardize and offer this kind of more generic and aggregated view. But if you have a particular need on your campaign and you want to have access only to Nielsen data and use their segment directly, we can make that available for you. Or if you want to use LiveRamp and onboard your own data, you can do that too as well.
That's something I really want to key in on. I wrote the article about like likely to buy catch-up, right, with demographic targeting. And Nielsen might call it likely to buy catch-up. And one of the partners that use LiveRamp might say interested in condiments, right? And so what Erik is telling you is that his team, the teams at Adswizz, are taking the data from all these sources and grouping them in a name that makes sense, right? Because every partner, there's no standardization. Nielsen, Lotami, LiveRamp, every partner is Exalate, Experian. They're all going to they're going to name it themselves. They're not bound by any rules on that end. They're trying to appeal to you uniquely, not necessarily make it easier for you to combine it. So what Adswizz is doing here is making it a readable, aggregate form. They're also saying that you can get the direct one. So if you want to, like, you always buy Nielsen segments and that's all you want, awesome. Or if you have your own data through LiveRamp and other sources, it sounds like they're going to be able to onboard that for you. And that's something that we shouldn't take for granted, right? IP address lookup right now for demographic is the lower end of match. Because this is an audio-based platform and it can do more than podcasting, we need to remember that they do have the ability to match on device IDs and cookies. But IP is going to become more and more important as we go towards an identity solution, because that identity part, that IP is going to be an anchor point to help all these different first-party identity sources, right? Like logging into a specific website and then matching it to a different website. that identity information is going to be really important to match that together with IP as a focal point instead of an afterthought. So we're not at a disadvantage in podcast advertising, especially with demographic lookup. We just need to recognize that IP is a household object, and that if you're targeting male versus female, you're aiming for the household and the information that's generally known about the household or that's more prominent in there. So there's nothing to worry about. Household targeting, it does work. It is very effective, and we should absolutely be exploring it on demographic targeting.
And I think household is very interesting as well, because if you tie it to the listening content we talked about earlier, right, the smart speaker, we have built another product offering, which is basically we went ahead and looked at zip codes. And out of zip codes, we can assign actually very relevant information from the Census Bureau, from a lot of sources around, for example, incomes. So you could also, to your point, leverage the household targeting based on zip code to target brackets of incomes in certain regions. So that, I think that it's good to point out that some may approach audio and look at, it's a stripped down version because there's no data, it's hard to target. It's quite actually not true. There's tons of things you can do. And we'll talk about in future deep dive sessions through context of the content, through context of the listener, where you don't necessarily need the trackability of all the cookies. And it comes to the roots of audio, right? You look at video and display, they've grown up with all the data, they've grown up with all that context. It was easier between quotes. I don't want to reduce somebody's job, but it was easier between quotes. If you look at audio, because of the high fragmentation we had from day one, you can consume left and right, from your Tesla to your Roku and God knows what's next device. The technology we built and others have built has been with that in mind, and trying to offer the same level of targeting, same level of insight, whilst having a different landfill. And I think today we're proving that it works. And with a privacy world changing, I think audio is in a prime position to be able to absorb this privacy change, we can call it, versus others who might suffer a bit more or have a longer adaptation curve.
Yeah, we've been there. We've been in an IP-focused world since the start. And so we understand the privacy. We understand the restrictions there. The rest of the advertising world is going to have to get down to our level. I just hope they come and have conversations with us, because we'd love to share, and we'd love their input on how to improve it. Yeah, I think we're a pretty friendly group in the podcasting space. Yeah, but the accuracy of household, I want to just hit on something. Me and you joked about this before, but if I have a problem I'm trying to solve, and an ad comes to me to tell me about how to solve my problem, I do not care. But if my wife gets an ad about the problem I've told her about, and she comes to me and she's like, I just got this ad, I think this is a great solution, I'm more receptive to it. So if you're just like, I only want women to listen to this ad, it's not going to happen. I don't even know if it's going to happen in mobile device ID and cookie targeting, but you're looking at a household. It's a coin flip in these situations. But if you acknowledge that there are people in that household that will resonate with this, and you take the power of that in mind, it is massive success with it.
And I think, I'll tee up to another session, another deep dive you're scheduling. It's all about also looking at performance and attribution.
Yeah.
So you don't need to make it pitch perfect to the trackable person that we know that's going in a way no matter what to be successful. And to report exactly, if you acknowledge and you understand the context in which you're operating, there are actually tools to prove or disprove the performance of your campaign and make sure you optimize and then reach your objectives. So I think that's goes hand in hand. So there is no limitation on that side.
Very cool. Well, awesome. So this is the forecasting part. It looks like we got on the right-hand side, that's the generated report to show me what is available, right?
Exactly. So once I'm done, what I'm plotting here, and I can select some metrics, I can play a little bit with what I want to look here, but basically start to understand trends. And two things to point out, and I can even do a bar chart here. We're looking at two metrics at high level, because audio is kind of everywhere. You're going to have different capabilities for devices. And very often you'll have devices that can carry a display, companion banner. That's often the apps of the publisher themselves. So think of iHeart, think of TuneIn or radio.com, where the publisher not only produces the content, also owns its app that listens or distributes it. And they can offer augmented audio experience. So what you're seeing here is audio impression that you might have available for your campaign, which are compatible with banner and which gonna go without banner. And that also helps you kind of understand your strategy if you're interested in that. And then what we're looking at is seasonality, or if I call it over 2 weeks, but the trends over 2 weeks. And what we're noting right away is that there is a dip in the weekend, right? So my weekend schedule or delivery might be affected. Do I want to revisit that? Should I change the strategy? It's a good indication on the 2 coming weeks. I can already understand that my delivery should be focused on the weekdays versus weekends. And the metrics we're seeing here, this is in this case a marketplace we're looking at. Here is what is the total potential avails for my campaign. It doesn't guarantee, as I said earlier, that I would get those because I'm competing. My price would determine, and if the price is going up midweek, I might need to change my strategy. But it gives you an indication around how many impressions you could get for your campaign. And the second here is what is a unique, so the reach I could expect to get. And again, to your point earlier, it's not about individual, it's about devices. So how many unique devices could we expect getting in this context? And then a ratio impression to unique. So this objective here is to understand, am I in line with what the advertiser is expecting? Is there inventory available for me to proceed? And if there is, I can go to the next step, which is basically setting up my campaign.
And that's interesting. So the listening frequency part, if I were to set the frequency cap on the previous part of it, that would adjust to whatever I set, which would affect the numbers in my total reach.
Correct. Again,
that's very
here
cool.
I went full uncapped. If I want to cap per hour, day, month, week, depending on my needs, it would affect here the results.
Yeah, more than anything, I just wanted to call out that 21 listening frequency might be higher than most people aim for, but that's something that you can test out and you can improve around. We just wanted to show you a full breadth of it. And I like this. I think that a lot of people think about the dangers of repurposing other content into podcasting. And I think that if you're going to do audio, having a podcast first audio execution is very smart because that can work in other audio formats easier than like a radio ad can work in podcasting. Think the more intimate out. We always forget about banners. We always forget about accompanying creatives. There are some apps out there. There are some players out there that can do that. I think that that's something we need to shine a light on a little bit more for that experience, because I think people need to evaluate the benefit of taking advantage of that. And I don't think we talk about that nearly enough in this space.
Yeah, and it's to keep evolving, right? If you look at, it's not only the banner you might get on the web player or on the mobile. Just recently, we went from smart speaker without a screen to smart speaker with a screen, right? We have the Echo Show or whatever the latest name is, which is basically a Nest Hub or an Alexa Echo Show and Alexa with a screen. And audio can be consumed on that one. There could be new experiences, both for content and advertising you can leverage there. And that's going to keep changing. There's going to keep being new devices and new players going out there. So being able to understand and reflect what's available there is super important when you meet a plan.
That's so killer. Everybody thinks about smart speakers like the little discs and hubs of like the Amazon Alexa. And you know, they're not just that anymore. They do have screens. I have a show and I use it on my desk to tell me my calendar and things like that. But if I hear an ad or something, there is a visual display, right? If I grab the iHeart player and I play a podcast and it's in my pocket and there's an ad, the banner might be something I'm engaging with because I have it open. But with these smart speakers, as the technology advances, we're going to see more and more of them with screens on it. Exactly like you said. I think Amazon just created like a home hub that's even bigger than their largest show. This is something to keep in mind, especially with audio, because while the visual component might not be a primary driver and it's not something we rely on, if you can add it in there, do it. Explore it. Take advantage of it. Give them one more prompt to interact with your brand.
And in this context, for the platform, and in most cases, you don't pay extra for it.
Yeah, that's very true.
The driver is the audio, and that's what you focus on in terms of optimization, in terms of insights, and obviously delivery. And the banner, that's what we call it, a companion banner. It comes along when it can, if I can put it like that. Very so there is no restriction in trying.
Very smart. Awesome. So now we're going to go into the actual campaign setup, right?
Exactly. We assume that now we're good to go. We get a green light. Our advertiser is super happy. So we're going to go ahead and set up. And 4 steps to get there. I went ahead and pre-filled a few things to make this a bit smoother. But basically here, I'm just going to re-enter the parameters that are going to represent my contractual and my order. So here you will see that the flight dates are the same. I now enter the budget. So I want to spend $10K on this campaign. It's about this guy who has a podcast. I don't know if you know him.
I hear his mom listens to it a lot.
A lot. So we'll do a promo for his mom. And then what is important to keep in mind on the buy side platform is the way of transacting. Maybe we can make a break. Dynamic ad insertion, it's only about how you insert the content, not how it's sold or what kind of creative. So there are 3 buckets: the way you insert the content, being it baked in, the old way; dynamic insertion, the new way, or the way to go, if you ask me; The second piece is what kind of creative are you delivering? A host-read, a produced, whatever the flavor. And the third bucket is how did you transact this particular campaign? And what you're seeing here, I went ahead and select programmatic, but I actually could decide that I want to do a guaranteed buy. And to your point earlier, programmatic is I need to bid and there is no guarantee on the inventory. Guaranteed is that if you were the publisher, you and I are going to agree on inventory that you're going to reserve for me. And the tool will help you do so. I don't need to pick up the phone, find your credential. I will find you on the platform, send you an offer. You would have our tools on the other side, and you will see, okay, am I interested in buying this campaign from Erik? Okay, I'll book that inventory, and it's going to show up in this tool as well. So all the flavors of transaction are also supported by the tool. Here we'll stick to programmatic, but just keep in mind that you can have several ways up to the sponsorship as well if you're interested in that.
Absolutely, and we need to key in on that. Programmatic does not only mean open marketplace. I think we're going to actually dig into that in the future too. So excited to continue to have you guys back this year. But that's the big thing. Programmatic and these tools are ways to interact between buyers and publishers. You could get down to the fact where all you're doing is a manual host-read campaign using a tool like this with one direct piece of inventory. And what it does is it gets you out of Google Sheets. It gets you out of email. It gets you out of manually sending assets and sending tracking pixels. The easiest way to understand it is open marketplace because it means as a buyer, you can experiment. You don't have to build those relationships direct. But programmatic is a workflow tool. It is something that allows you to interact and operate in a condensed way in one platform. So if I decide I'm going to buy all of my audio inventory in AudioMatic, what that means is I don't have to split how I'm tracking things. I don't have to split how I'm sending like the insertion orders. I don't have to split how I'm emailing files and tracking pixels. I can reduce some of that overhead on the operation side.
And it's actually important to point out that programmatic for the publisher doesn't mean bad ads. Not at all. You control what gets onto your podcast and you have all the tools. And on the buy side, it doesn't mean unknown content because you have all the tools to slice and dice to make sure that you have brand sustainability and have the insight. So it's really, really not about creating or leveraging one side versus the other. To your point exactly, it's about automating so that you can gain scale. And that's what we want for this ecosystem.
Publishers can, if I'm understanding correctly, a publisher can approve each individual creative, right? Like that. Correct. That means that they might miss out on a campaign because by the time they approve it, it's already spent or not available. But if you want that type of control as a publisher, it's available and it's something you should consider. Now, one question I have here, we built this all out in the forecasting side. Is there a way to say, okay, I want it in the forecasting side, kick it over to a campaign, or do I have to enter it in right now?
To this stage, you still need to re-enter the parameters. It is actually a very hot feature request we have on our backlog.
Awesome.
So you're not the only one there that asked it. At this stage, you need to re-enter a few parameters because we ask you for a few more information there. But it's something we're looking into.
That's great.
If we can make things more efficient.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. This is all about efficiency after all. And this is a good point. Erik, if I'm a client of this platform, just to reiterate to everyone, I can submit feature requests. I can ask for more workflow improvements.
This is a supported platform, right? So we don't operate on your behalf, you operate it. However, we have a team which is here. We have a support team, would you run into an issue, and we have an account management team, would you need advice or have insight on the inventory buying or strategy and so on. So you're really not alone in this context. We have a dedicated team across the globe, whether it's in North America, in Europe, or in other regions that can help you. And this is what also our belief at Advertiser is that 50% of our success is made of the product, 50% is made of the people we have on the team, which knows audio, and we spend a lot of time audio, speak to a lot of partners across the ecosystem, so they have a good understanding. And they can give you pointers. They don't have all the answers, but they can give you pointers in context. We often get partners in Europe asking us, what's going on in the US? Can you give us a blank of what's going on in the US on the podcast, and vice versa? So programmatic is very well advanced in Europe versus US. They have more advanced strategy, they leverage way more advanced formats at a little smaller scale. Programmatic in the US is not so advanced in terms of format. However, the scale is big. Podcast is way more advanced in the US than in Europe. So you see, there's a lot of things there, and that's what our team is able to bring to the table as well when you're trying to build strategy or you need more insight.
I'm a fan of that.
So here, a lot of parameters, obviously, my budget and how I want to control it. We'll talk in the future video about attribution. But here, basically, those are commercial parameters. The second item, it's about my ads, right? What are the creatives I'm going to run? So I went ahead and uploaded my 30-second spots. But basically here, it's going to be the kind of creative. So we talked about the audio, obviously. If I have a companion banner, I would load it here. Second screen is a retargeting tool so that your companion banner can run not only on the app where the audio is consumed, but it can actually run on the website where the user is. So let's imagine I'm listening on to the podcast on an Alexa at home, but I'm browsing the New York Times, or I'm browsing CNN.com or any kind of web page. We would actually combine those signals and deliver the display onto the website you are, so that we have the audio in your ears and we put the banner in front of your eyes.
What platforms are you connected to do second screen?
So we have connected to several bidders and exchanges, and we do that for a partner called Beeswax, which is well known in the industry. So we customize integration with them. I think we're one of the early partners with the team, and we built out pretty advanced and pretty scalable connections to most of the display ecosystem there. So we're seeing interesting result, but maybe we keep those for more attribution and performance conversations. But just to point out what second screen is.
Yeah, I think the thing that I really want to harp on there is that for the people in the podcast industry, it's easy to forget about the fact that people have multifaceted plans. A tool like this means that a buyer has more options, right? Podcasting should be one of many pronged approach that an advertiser takes to accomplish their goals. And every chance that a platform allows you to buy podcasting and augment it with more options is fantastic. It's going to allow more spend in this space, because it doesn't mean that everything is an island. The more things that are connected, even if they're not a priority, add massive benefit.
And then again, you're going to see that each strategy is going to be different. So offering options is very important. Yep. Then this is pretty straightforward. So yeah, I uploaded a standard ad. It's you can have some tracking, so you can enter some tracker and for your attribution. But I won't spend too much time on that in this video. But basically, those are the settings for your assets. You could have several ads per campaign. And why is that important? Because then once we have set up our assets or creatives, we go into the targeting world. So here, again, I went ahead and made our life easier and copied manually the targeting. But the first thing you notice here is that I'm actually selecting what kind of ad. So let's imagine I'm having a strategy with multiple creatives. To my earlier point about the smart speaker versus the device being a mobile, I could here start to select my creative and then derive what strategy I want for each creative, which opens up a lot of opportunities and way of building up your strategy. Here is pretty straightforward. We are actually looking at the deliverables we set on in the media planning. What I wanted to point out, we talked about the demographic segments, but we also combine and have the same approach for behavioral segments. So your ketchup lovers or ketchup buyers will be here in the behavioral with the price points. And behind the scenes, as I said, is the known data partners that you all know. Here, the idea is we combine them. We make them easy to understand as one name, one definition. And it's also optimizing towards reach because we combine several vendors behind one. Would you like here to see Nielsen isolate? I would say it's just a phone call away.
That is such an understated feature. I don't know how many hours that I've lost looking through multiple data partners to try and figure out the exact segments to use. So I think media
and
buyers.
You don't need to trust my world, right?
Yeah.
You don't need to trust my world. You have the media planning. Yep. So if you want to try things, you actually go and media plan. Oh, this segment doesn't work on my one. So you really have the full visibility. That's why media planning is very important because you can try and error without buying, right? You don't need to be live and I spend 1 week of spending money, which doesn't really make sense. No, I media plan and understand ahead of time.
That's great.
And there is an extensive list, right? So again, just want to point out that dynamic ad insertion allows you to cover a wide area of targeting and delivery. So obviously all things geographical, point of interest. If you have a list of predefined point of interest, like I want all the coffee places in New York, you could select. So you could have an advertiser which come in with all the point of interest of its retail chain. So McDonald's in New York wants to make sure that we target all the Burger King so that they can deliver a message when you're around the Burger King. Swing by McDonald's, there is a better deal for you. Again, audio is this thing what you take with you. So the strategies you can actually derive from it are pretty interesting. Obviously, there are some some Podscribe and podcast related items, but I'll save those for another video. But basically, here what we want to show out is that this is all criteria which advertisers and agencies are used to in video and display. And through dynamic ad insertion, you make that available for audio, which is very,
and you can do these in the forecasting tool and in the targeting. So
exactly,
you'll be able to get an idea of what you're going to get.
Yeah, exactly. So then once you're ready, obviously you simply need to look at your summary page if you want to go over and cross-check information for your campaign. And then you simply go and schedule your campaign and you're ready to go.
That's awesome.
Obviously here, I wouldn't have any data. My campaign hasn't started, but this will be where I track the delivery, my spend, so I understand my margin. But maybe we can cover that in the reporting section.
Personally, I think it's very generous of you to spend $10,000 on my podcast, and I'll buy you a nice dinner soon when we get to meet up in person with all that. But so this is fantastic. We have the forecasting, we have the campaign itself, and we got the reporting to end with. So the reporting is going to show us the effectiveness of a campaign. Now, because Erik set this up as a sample, the campaign data that we're looking at is not going to be the same as the forecasting or the setup. But this I want to
illustrate how reporting looks like. So obviously we have a visual, high-level KPIs, and you would have a bar graph here. And then we have what we call custom reporting. And that's our kind of our philosophy here. Instead of defining how you want to look at the results, that means that you're going to call me every time you want to look at something which is not in a platform. I would like a mobile and broken up by DMA and demographic. I need to build something. So I said, instead of asking you to define a menu, we give you all the ingredients and the kitchen. We'll define what ingredients are in the kitchen. You build your menu. And this is what you see here, basically. This is our pivot reporting, where I have two main sections, which are the dimensions. And they are covering all the targeting criteria we went over, some additional information. So you can really start to go crazy in terms of how you want to look at particular data points. And then you have all the metrics. So audio impressions, your CTR, which is your conversion in terms of clicks. You can start to have information around your data CPM. You're buying media, but you're going to spend some data, so you want to track that. And all other information that might be relevant to you. So those are all the metrics. And then you simply drag and drop them here.
How many dimensions can I use?
So we don't necessarily limit. We just have some rule of engagement. So basically, in the UI, we'll limit you to 3 dimensions. So otherwise, the UI may cook up. But you can go furthermore. I think we'll go all the way up to 7, if my memory serves me well. And then it becomes what we call an offline report, where we'll ask you to schedule it, and you're going to get it in your mailbox in the CSV file, and then you can do whatever you want with it. So we have some very creative customers when it comes to reporting. But again, everybody's different and looking at data differently, and being able to slice and dice the way you want and exporting the CSV so that you can match with other initiatives you're having is very important. So here, I just illustrated that I wanted to look a particular order, which contains my campaigns. Order is the highest object, and an order can be composed of several campaigns, and each campaign can be composed of several ads. So here I went ahead and selected one order. I was looking at a DMA breakdown, so you could look at audio impressions, your click, and your LTR, which is your listen through rate, right? How many ads made it through 100% of listening in terms of percentage? And then I can very well drive in my age and gender buckets to understand my skew in certain regions or my devices. And what is interesting is that if I'm running a campaign and I haven't necessarily targeted those criteria, they're still available to me. So I could be able to run a campaign and I haven't really selected any age and gender, but I can still run an age and gender report to understand what was the reach on that particular population, so that in a future campaign I can optimize. So we really give you both sides of the coin from that angle.
So are you saying that the demographic and behavioral data is something that I pay to target, but for the reporting aspect to see the split of it, I don't pay for it?
It's available if you wish for reporting, as an insight, as we call it.
That is amazing, right? That is such a powerful thing, right? Obviously there is a cost associated to targeting, but what that means is Adswizz has provided you the ability to look and see what does work, broken out how you want by data that you haven't targeted that is still relevant. That means that you're going to be able to figure out, should you further filter out a campaign? Or should you break it out a little bit higher? Are there things you should exclude? Are there things you should do a specific strategy about targeting? That's such a robust piece of reporting. And these dimensions, this type of reporting here is very similar to what people are used to in DoubleClick Campaign Manager and Trade Desk, this level here. And I see my favorite button right there. It says schedule. Does that mean I can set that as an email? Like I can create a specific report and then I can have that sent to other people on my team on a set day or anything?
Exactly. So I can select a particular report and for how long I want it to run. I can set the frequency, time zone. Obviously, I have a different sales team, and then you're going to get that in your mailbox delivered right away.
Which is really powerful because so many people have deliveries that they have to provide for their clients or whatnot at very early times on Monday morning, Tuesday morning, whenever. So knowing that by the time you log in that day, you're going to have that report sitting there waiting for you on your specific parameters so you can make it your own and present it, it's really important.
And all the data you're seeing here is close to real time. When I say close to real time, is that you launch your campaign a couple of minutes after impressions are starting to show in this reporting view. So there's not like 8-hour delay between impressions. You actually are very, very close to actual delivery. So in another session, we'll talk about optimization. This becomes very, very important when you look at attribution.
Absolutely. So Erik, this was fantastic. The AudioMatic tool, I think, is a really powerful option for buyers and agencies or advertisers and agencies really to dig into. My question is, how do they get access to this? How do they learn more about it, get their own walkthrough, get their own access to an account?
So you can definitely check out adtech.com for more info in terms of feature set. And if you wish to reach out to our sales team, there is a contact form on adtech.com, or you can send an email to us at contact@adtech.com, and we'll be in touch and walk you through in greater details. And if you're excited, we'll sign you up.
That's awesome. And Erik has hinted at it a few times here. I didn't call it out well enough earlier, but we have 3 more product deep dives over the course of the year with Adswizz. Adswizz was the first partner to sign up for the product deep dive platform with Sounds Profitable. And honestly, they're the reason why this was able to happen. They have very cool and robust tools. I'm very excited to be able to walk through them for my own knowledge and to share it with all of you. But understand that you get this level of expertise and this level of walkthrough when you work with them, that they're going to make sure that you understand all of it. You get the ability to make feature requests. For such a big company, they're very open to feedback and how these things work and where you need help with it. Great customer service and great accessibility around the world. So Erik, thank you so much for joining me here today. I am thrilled to have walked through this, and I hope that we have a lot more people using this platform soon, because the more people buying in podcasting, the bigger this industry gets.
Oh, it's a win-win. Thanks for having me.